Back in school, I was never really a big reader. Come to think of it, I wasn't much of a talker either. Yet here I am. In school, we were encouraged and made to read, as I'm sure most of the people watching this video were. And perhaps like many of the people watching this video, I found myself much more interested in video games rather than reading. Ever since the day my father brought home a shiny new Sega Master System console, of which I spent many hours playing away. By the time I was coming into my teenage years, we purchased a games console known as the PlayStation, which would hit the world by storm, and something which we're still feeling the effects of to this very day. Of course, like any teenager growing up in the 2000s, video games became a big part of our life. The Nintendo 64, Dreamcast, the PlayStation 2, GameCube, Xbox. Although most of these were capable of online connectivity, I don't recall ever really using it, and I don't think the real explosion of the online gaming console space would really come in until much later. I put this down as one of the reasons why I never really got into online gaming, other than the occasional split-screen multiplayer game at my friend's house, or the rare occasion I would play online. I was mostly a solo player. I'd stay alone in my room, and I'd play my games. My Smackdowns, Final Fantasies, Grand Theft Autos, Tony Hawk's, Pro Evolutions, FIFAs. Many a night I would spend my time in my room experiencing these games, and I did that roughly from the ages of 13 to, well, probably 23 when I moved out. Of course, this was a coming of age time for me and my friends, as we tried to maneuver through school together, discovering alcohol, discovering girls, well, trying to, and failing to. Some of us were even smart enough to learn things at school. I wouldn't say I was one of them. I remember one of our friends had the idea to start a football team. He got together our immediate circle of friends and began moulding this plan into reality. Now, most of us weren't any good at football, myself included. But growing up in England, you weren't allowed to not like football. So we eventually managed to arrange a kick around at our local park for training. It was a public park, the kind where parents would take dogs for walks and jackets had to be used for goalposts. As fate would have it, there would be another group of teenagers playing football there too. They were around the same age as us, and the suggestion came up that we should play a friendly match against each other. And so we did, and we won, convincingly. So I may have lied about their ages. They were probably slightly younger, and they were smaller, and there were less of them, but we still won. Soon afterwards we would have our first official match in an official league. We'd all bought matching kits and embroidered our names onto the back. We were excited for our first match, a match that we would lose quite badly. All I'll say is that one of the team's scores got into double figures. This would become a routine we would continue weekly, and by that I mean the matches and the losing badly. We actually became quite well known in our school before long for our semi-famous football team and the losing badly. But given our love of video games, I eventually recreated our team on Pro Evolution Soccer 5 for the PlayStation 2, and I recreated every single member of our team, from their appearance all the way down to their abilities. We even had our own football kit and logo in the game. Such as the quirkiness of the game, it allowed you to create players with dog heads, so I made my friends two dogs too. They had a high top speed, but poor ball control. We would persevere with the team all the way through school, until the day we finished. And then, after going off to college, we would continue still, for years. We had even won a few matches by this point. The time we would spend together was a muddled mess of football and alcohol. Well, if I'm being honest, often more alcohol than football. What I said earlier about growing up in England and not being able to not be involved with football, that's probably only bested by drinking alcohol. There were times where we would drink almost every day of the week. We were 18 by this point, which meant that the days of us trying to sneak into pubs or find places that would let us buy cans or bottles without IDing us were over. We were allowed, by law, to go into a pub. This was a novelty to us, one which is long worn off now, but one we put a lot of effort into wearing out back then. I still have memories of retching after drinking yet another medicinal flavoured Jaeger bomb, tipping my head up to the ceiling, torpedoing a bottle of brightly coloured sugary liquid down my throat, or doing a shot of something that could have very well have been nail polish. We would eventually become known by our local football organisation. The people who worked there would recognise us, for we did it for so long and so consistently. After my time in college was up, I was off to university. Not a million miles away, but it was, however, far enough away to be considered an inconvenience to going back and playing football every week, especially for me, as someone who never even particularly liked playing it in the first place. So I would go, less and less, as would some of our other friends. Some stopped entirely. I would go to university for 3 years, still seeing my friends, even if less so. I had an entire new world in which to drink copious amounts of alcohol and drunkenly walk sideways home like a crab. But perhaps that's a story for another time. When my and my friends' time in university was over, we eventually all gravitated back to each other in our hometown, the same place we had been all of those years prior. We tried and we did do the same things. The old team back together. We would play football matches once more in the same place we used to. This time facing men instead of teenagers. Quite a few of us didn't have jobs immediately after graduating, most of us. So we would go back to our old drinking habits again too. On the same street, the same venues, the same medicinal flavoured Jaeger bombs, except this time the bad taste wasn't limited to the drink. This wasn't the charming thing it used to be. The days of drinking 10 beers as quickly as you could, just to hop to another bar to do the same thing again, I felt they were behind me at this point, and I didn't really fancy doing it anymore. What was supposed to be leisure time felt more like an endurance challenge. I suppose this was aggravated by me having spent 3 years with like-minded people at university, where we were mostly on the same wavelength about things, and I remember thinking, my old friends are just people who I happen to live in the same town as, be enrolled in the same school as, and discovered alcohol together with. Our group of friends would gradually hang out less, and even less when we all got jobs, and even less when we all moved slightly farther away, and even less when we all got jobs farther away. I think this is a pretty common thing among school friends becoming adults. As the years went on, we would still see each other sporadically. Now, I don't recall seeing them since the whole pandemic thing. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever see them again. Although, I'm sure I eventually shall. My mum still lives in the same house, and has done for over 20 years now. My room is still there for whenever I go back and visit, although it has been somewhat reappropriated for the purpose of storage and old clothes. Even so, it's still essentially how it was when I grew up in it. Off-white walls. A single window facing an old familiar tree. A wardrobe with dozens of faded stickers. A dusty old bookshelf containing old CDs, Pokemon cards and magazines. And the football award that we received for eventually winning the league. I recall going back there on one occasion, maybe 1 or 2 years ago. I must have been about 32. There I saw, on the cheap old shelf that has somehow survived all of these years, a dusty memory card with some kind of marking scrawled in pencil. I spent that afternoon digging through the possessions in my room. I found my PlayStation 2, my controller, my Pro Evolution 5 disc, and I set them up on my TV. I remember I had to fiddle around with my console because it was doing that annoying disc read error thing. But it managed. The familiar whir of the console reading the disc, the low resolution graphics coming onto the screen, asking me, once again, after all of this time, to press the start button. I navigated the menu, like walking a path I used to know so well. Selecting the edit menu, there are a list of our full names, as if school children on a register. Using the D-pad, I worked my way down, past the names of my friends, and the dogs who had since passed away. The CD drive spluttering with every request. I find my name, and there I was, staring back at me, my 17-year-old self, or rather, the person I thought I was when I was 17. frozen in time in this digital form. I went to play a game, and there we all were, all of our teenaged avatars, running around, playing football, like we used to. Memories came flooding back to me, going to the supermarket as teenagers on sunny days to buy snacks for our picnics, walking through the blurry night, our ears ringing from hours in nightclubs, journeying home from school under a tunnel of tall trees on blindingly bright days, road trips to obscure villages hundreds of miles away, laughing until our stomachs were rock hard after a friend's shoe was left behind as he jumped to make the bus. I wonder if they remember these moments as I do. I feel as though I could no longer be here one day, and this version of me would still exist, inside this tiny plastic block. I feel as though this thing that I'd put so much of my youth into had retained a part of it in return. This all happened quite a while ago. It was only recently when I read a passage from a novel where I thought of this moment again, and it all seemed to come together. The passage reads, "Returning home on this particular day of days, I paused upon the bridge and watched for a while the lazy barges manoeuvring their way between the piers. It was one of those hushed summer evenings, when the air even of grim cities is full of whispering voices, and as turning away from the river, I passed through the white toll gate, I had a sense of leaving myself behind me, on the bridge. So vivid was the impression, that I looked back, half expecting to see myself, still leaning over the iron parapets, looking down into the sunlit water." This was from Paul Kelver, an autobiographical novel released in 1902 by Jerome K. Jerome, and I don't know if I've ever had a stronger eureka moment. There was so much wrapped up in these football characters. They didn't just embody the teenagers we were at the time, but the people we thought we may one day be. A few of us thought we could actually become a semi-professional football team, through some kind of luck or misguided fate. And that's what these virtual avatars really represent to me. They are the people we used to think we were. And when I look at me and all of us running around, I realize I'm looking back at them, staring into the sunlit water, blissfully unaware of what the future holds. Perhaps I'll meet my old school friends again one day, and we'll drink and reminisce about old times, although I'm not quite ready to consider them old times. Not just yet, anyway. This was a different kind of video to the ones I usually do, although technically it is video game related. And this video idea has kind of been lying in my head like a formless ball, and I've gradually tried to kind of mold it into something. And I think that quote really helped to conceptualize this whole thing for me. And I actually found out about that quote from a video. Can't remember at all, but I will put a screenshot. Then I began to record the whole thing. Wasn't sure if I liked the direction it was going in or the tone, so I kind of left it for a bit, so it was now a semi-formed ball lying in my head. Then I began listening to an audiobook, Patrick Stewart's memoirs, and I love Patrick Stewart like any reasonable person does. And listening to that really helped me to find my voice for this video. Of course, not comparing myself to Patrick Stewart. But after that I did re-record quite a lot of the video to kind of try and convey my emotions and memories better. I mean, this video is probably going to get like 7 views, but I am very much interested in exploring video games and how they relate to us as people, so I may very well do another video like this in the future. But on the off chance someone did watch this whole thing, I'm glad to have shared something that would have otherwise just been a thought in my own head, and I hope to see you in future videos. Thank you.